today, we're really excited for the presentation we have. We are the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. We're the Central Virginia node, and we're sponsoring this talk. We're a state program meant to establish Virginia as a global center for excellence in cybersecurity research. We support cybersecurity research, workforce development, and innovation and commercialization at the intersection between cybersecurity, autonomous systems, and intelligence. And each year, CCI and CVN sponsor research and experiential learning projects. And so today's speaker is a recipient of that funding. Today, we have Dr. Ravi Hadimani, and he is an associate professor and director of the Biomagnetics Laboratory at VCU. And Dr. Hadimani specializes in non-invasive brain stimulation, biomagnetics, magnetocalorics, and energy harvesting research. And he's had a distinguished academic journey, including a Ph.D. in electrical engineering from Cardiff University in the UK. And he's earned lots of recognition for his groundbreaking work. Notably, his hybrid piezoelectric and photovoltaic won the UK Energy Innovation Award in 2011, and it was showcased by the BBC, New Scientist, and Scientific American. And as a senior IEEE member, Dr. Hadimani actively contributes to the IEEE Magnetics and Engineering in Medicine and Biology Studies, where he is a founder and current vice chair of the Joint Magnetics and Engineering in Medicine and Biology Society Richmond chapter. And today he's going to share his presentation, Personalized Human Brain Phantom and Rat Brain Phantom for Testing and Training Cyber Attacks and Intentional Electromagnetic Interference Attacks. And this research was funded by the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, and it focuses on anatomically realistic brain phantoms that play a crucial role in neuromodulation security, safety research, and training. So enjoy, and be sure to join the Q&A session afterwards.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Ravi Hadimani. I'm an associate professor at Virginia Commonwealth University in the Department of Mechanical and Nuclear Engineering. I have a few other affiliations as well. Most recently with the Harvard Medical School. I'm a visiting associate professor there. And the work that is presented here is a product of collaborations from all these affiliated institutes. So, and of course, there are several collaborators and students who have contributed to this work, but the list is quite big, so I don't think I will be able to accommodate in one page, so you just see my name. So the title of my talk today is Personalized Human Brain Phantom and Rat Brain Phantom for Testing and Training Cyber Attacks and Intentional Electromagnetic Interference Attack. Trying to move forward. Okay, the structure of my talk is as follows. First, I'll give an introduction to brain stimulation, focusing on a specific technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And then I'll talk about some of the recent works from my lab on how we have developed new focal TMS coils, and also how we can use new technologies like additive manufacturing to fabricate these coils. And then I'll talk about the development of our brain phantom for neuromodulation purposes, and also can be used for neuroimaging. And you will see how this brain phantom can be used for not just testing neuromodulation procedures, but also for other applications or other safety features such as cyber attacks. As I was saying, I'll then show a special case of TMS and deep brain stimulation, which is another neuromodulation technique. So we use our brain phantom to test the safety of this hybrid neuromodulation procedure. And then, if time permits, I'll talk about some of the neuronal network models that we have developed, focusing on motor pathway. So before I start to talk about the brain stimulation, I want to list some of the motivations why we are doing neuromodulation or brain stimulation. National Institute of Health estimates about 1 in 4 Americans above the age of 18 suffer from some form of diagnosable neurological or psychiatric disorder. That adds to a staggering number. If that is the case, then there is a critical need for researchers to develop new tools, new treatment procedures, new drugs to combat these neurological and psychiatric disorders. So I think 2013 or around about that time, there was a special initiative from President's office. It was called US Brain Initiative. BRAIN stands for Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. So there is a focus on neurotechnologies. So there was a lot of there were a lot of initiatives from several federal agencies, and NIH suggests that there is an investment of about $5 billion needed in the US towards this initiative. And there are similar efforts in other federal agencies of other countries as well. Most notably, the European Human Brain Project that has invested about $1.61 billion in their Brain Initiative project. There is clearly a need for new devices and technologies to treat psychiatric and brain disorders. So neuromodulation techniques or these neuromodulation devices can alter brain function non-invasively and safely without the need of surgery or ionizing radiation or drugs. So they have a lot of potential in treating or helping with these brain disorders. So several new devices are entering the market that can alter the brain function or image brain function or record the brain activity in specific location of the brain. So that is the motivation. But brain stimulation is nothing new. It existed for millennia. Back in BC, like 43 BC, I think it's the Greek philosophers used to use torpedo fish to get some stimulation on the brain. Dating back to that era to current day state-of-the-art brain stimulation, there has been several attempts to stimulate brain in one way or the other. One of the notable ones you might recognize is the Galvani frog hind limb stimulation using electric currents. The one that you see at the right hand here is Alan Hodgkin. Hodgkin and Huxley developed a model, mathematical model for synaptic or synapses or a neuronal firing. So basically, it's a set of few transistors and other electrical components. It's a circuit that models how nerves or neurons fire. But that is just one neuron firing. So there's a model, and they got Nobel Prize. This was way back in 1963. But since then, people have been trying to ensemble 80 billion neurons. That's what an adult human brain has. So imagine 80 billion neurons firing at different frequencies. So each neuron fires at about 5 to 10 hertz. And if they fire at 5 to 10 times per second, there are 80 billion neurons, and each neuron connects to about 10,000 neurons. So imagine the number of firing you will have to model. So the largest supercomputer cannot model our brain. So although there is a lot of work done, but human brain being the most complex organ in the living world, so it's still a long way to make an artificial brain or to model the entire brain. So, however, we don't have to go that far to treat some neurological or psychiatric diseases. Simple devices can target a group of neurons and alleviate many symptoms, or treat certain disorders by just targeting few neurons and stimulating a small area of the brain. So that is what I'm focusing on today. But if you can treat a small area of the brain, that means you can also adversely damage it, or you can, for cybersecurity, you can adversely attack it using the same neuromodulation devices. So what are the neuromodulation devices that exist in the market? Here are some I have listed. So the first one is transcranial direct current stimulation. It uses 2 electrodes and a very small current of the order of milliamps through a 9-volt battery. And this is stimulating with sub-threshold currents. And this is gaining popularity because of its portability and ease of administering the treatment. And then there are several others. The one that we work on is called transcranial magnetic stimulation. The one on the bottom left hand, it's called repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. Basically, we use a magnetic field to stimulate a focal area of the brain or a group of neurons. And then there are other devices such as electroconvulsive therapy, which is, though it's non-invasive, you don't need a surgery, or you don't need ionizing radiation or drug, but you still need to be hospitalized to take this treatment because it induces seizures. And then there are upcoming techniques such as transcranial focused ultrasound stimulation, where you can use ultrasound to stimulate a deeper region in the brain that cannot be reached by other devices. So it is gaining popularity. However, the underlying mechanism of focused ultrasound stimulation is not very well understood. So there are other ones that are quite widely used currently. And you can see here in this graph how the neuromodulation publications have increased rapidly in recent years. So if you think of all these devices, you can broadly classify them as non-invasive and invasive neuromodulation devices. The non-invasive neuromodulation devices stimulate by staying outside the brain or outside the head, whereas invasive stimulation devices stimulate the brain after being implanted below the skull or in the brain, such as the one that is on the right top corner. This is called DBS, deep brain stimulation. This is a very reliable technique. It has existed for a long time. This is used to treat Parkinson's disease. I will show an example of this one in the later slides. And then the bottom one is the vagus nerve stimulation. These both are invasive, but they are very reliable. They stimulate a specific region in the brain, and the effect is immediate, but they are continuous stimulation as well. Because they are continuous stimulation, you got to implant a battery pack in the body, so they are invasive. Whereas the non-invasive ones, such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, electroconvulsive therapy, and transcranial direct current stimulation, are easy to use. They're not they don't have a lot of risk associated with the surgery, and they don't need hospitalization. They can be used in outpatient setting. So there are so many of these brain stimulation devices, and there a lot of them will have the capability to connect to the network, especially the deep brain stimulator nowadays comes with the network connection capability, because the doctors can adjust the treatment currents remotely. So with all these devices, the safety of these devices is critical. And especially if people want to hack these devices or send a electromagnetic pulse or ultrasonic pulse from external to the body, they can do a real damage. It doesn't have to be right on the head. They can stay few distances, a few meters away, and well, that's still not possible. I wouldn't go that far, but it doesn't have to be right on the top of the head. You can still have certain distance between the head and the person trying to hack or attack the device non-invasively without having to touch anything. The person can send a strong electromagnetic signal or an ultrasound to these devices, and either they can impair these, or they can make these devices send such a incorrect signal that it can do a real damage to the brain. So the safety of these devices is at most of importance. So it's very critical. So if you want to make sure these are there is safety features adopted, then you need to test these using some brain phantoms for different scenarios. And that's where we come in with our brain phantoms. So before that, before introducing brain phantoms, I want to talk a little bit about the transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is the main focus of our research, and we are doing research in this that led us to develop brain phantoms. So basically, this technique uses magnetic fields outside the head, and it induces current in neurons, and those currents, after they reach certain threshold, will make the neurons fire. So basically, it's governed by Faraday's law of induction, or del cross E equals minus dB by dt. Time-varying magnetic field or magnetic flux will induce an electric field in the neurons. And so for transcranial magnetic stimulation, we depolarize the neuronal membrane to make a neuron fire. So we need a electric field potential on the neuronal membrane of plus 40 millivolts or above. So if we can reach this 40 millivolts or above on the neuronal membrane, then we can make the neurons fire. But however, if the neurons themselves reach above this threshold of minus, they are resting at a minus 70 millivolt resting state, resting potential, but you need to apply additional voltage or induce additional voltage in order to make them fire. So the threshold, when they reach threshold, they fire. But if you want to externally do reliably make them fire, then you have to apply a voltage equivalent of, or a induced voltage equivalent of 40 millivolts. So this is the fundamental principle underlying the TMS. So it is non-invasive, and it is surgery-free. So this is how a TMS device looks like. This is the coil which generates magnetic field, and here this is slightly a different coil, and that coil comes on top of the head, so it just about touches the head. It doesn't have to touch, but we have to make sure that it's as close to neurons as possible. So there is no electrical connection between either the coil or the head or anything. So there is a big barrier between the coil and the person's head. So when we send a large current through these are just copper windings. When we send a large current through this coil, so the current is of the order of 5,000 amps peak to peak. Sorry, this is peak, not peak to peak. So the amplitude is 5,000 amps at 2.5 kilohertz. So it's very short pulse of a duration of 0.4 milliseconds. So for that short time, we send very high current in these coils, and that generates a magnetic field. And the magnetic field is of the order of about 1.5 Tesla on the surface of the coil. And we do these 10 pulses per second. And if you do that, if you apply 10 hertz for 45 minutes, for 5 days a week, for about 2 months, then you induce permanent change in that part of the brain where you stimulate. And the permanent change occurs due to neuroplasticity. So it's like training, just like you train your muscles, you train your neurons too. So this is through neuroplasticity, you induce permanent changes in that part of the brain. That's why it's a prolonged treatment duration of 6 to 8 weeks. So the magnetic field inside the brain, or the field that penetrates through the brain, depends on the size of the coil and, of course, the current that you send. So here is a short video of how it is used.
If we start at the back of the brain, we've switched off my visual cortex, so made me unable to see things. If we move a little bit forward in the brain, we've interfered with people's ability and my ability to see faces. A little bit further forward, we've interfered with the ability to perform actions. Start moving your finger. Quite odd. It's not your finger. It's not my finger. We've interfered with the ability to compute with numbers. 6, 7, 8. Okay. Yeah. We've interfered with the ability to speak. London Bridge, London Bridge, London Bridge is falling down. You think of something you can do, and we've basically interfered with it with this machine. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what's the problem? I don't know.
So you got the idea how TMS works. So basically, you apply in locations where you want to alter the functions of the neurons, and that in turn changes a specific function in your body. The critical thing is you don't go anywhere close to the brain stem, because brain stem controls your heart, lungs, and all the critical functions. So how is this TMS used? So you go to any small town in the US now, you invariably find a TMS clinic. It is becoming very popular. It is FDA approved for treating depression. So there are a lot of TMS clinics now. But recently, TMS is also FDA approved for treating obsessive compulsive disorder. And more recently, it is also FDA approved for treating for smoking cessation. So these are different makes of TMS devices. So the MagStim is one quite widely used in research setting. Brainsway is a newcomer that is quite aggressively marketing their H1 coil, which is used for treating OCD and smoking cessation. And the one that is FDA approved for depression way back in 2008 is the Neuronetics coil. So although this is all psychiatric disorders, if you see, there are not many neurological or it's not FDA approved for diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. But if you look up any neurological or psychiatric disorder, there are some studies ongoing in some part of the world. So if you scour the literature, you will see that there are so many studies looking for treatment procedures using TMS technique. So these are the coils of the commercial TMS devices. So the one that I showed before, a simple figure of 8 coil, that is MaxStim's coil, that is quite widely used in research setting. But whereas NeuroStar has a little more complex, and a Hesed coil is even more complex coil design. So these coils stimulate different volume, their depth of penetration is different. So it all depends on the coil where you want to stimulate. So I did a lot of work in new coil developments. So if you want to, for example, if you want to treat a deeper region, say amygdala. Amygdala is the fear center of the brain. People suffering from PTSD have their amygdala hyper. So it has a much higher frequency of neuronal firing in PTSD patients than regular subjects. So if you want to treat PTSD and target amygdala, you need a coil much different from what is out there, because you need to stimulate deeper regions of the brain. So we came up with a new coil called a triple halo coil. Basically, we use a commercial coil on top, and then we use 3 separate coils that drive the magnetic field coming from the top coil down to the deeper regions of the brain. So in this graph, you can see that the top curve is for the triple halo coil, and the bottom one is for the Hesed coil. So here we are showing that with the same amount of stimulation on the cortex on the top, we can get stimulation fields in the amygdala that are above the threshold that will make the neurons fire. So with this coil. And then if you want to stimulate smaller area, then you need more focal coil. The commercial coils, especially the figure of 8 coil, is focal, but not focal enough to target very small regions such as primary auditory cortex. And we came up with a more focal coil than the commercially available, called quadruple butterfly coil. Basically, we use 2 sets of coils in different directions. The current flows in them in different directions. So the stimulation at the center becomes more focal. And here we show how it is more focal than the commercial coil. This is the commercial figure of 8 coil. This is our quadruple butterfly coil. So with this, we can target much smaller areas such as primary auditory cortex. Then now we are working on a coil design wherein if you want to stimulate different areas of the brain simultaneously, then you don't have to bring in multiple coils, or you don't have to move the coil around. So what we have done in this design is we have small arrays of coils joined together, and the currents in them go in varying directions that we control. And the coil have a central core, called a ferromagnetic core, that makes the field focal to a very small area. And depending on how we control the direction of the current in these coils, we can start to move the point of stimulation on the brain to different areas. Here we show how we can move the area of stimulation to different regions by activating different coils here. So this is very useful when you want to target the whole network. So suppose if you stimulate one area of the brain and if brain starts to compensate by activating the other part of the brain, then you might want to stimulate multiple regions of the brain simultaneously or one after the other immediately. So in that case, we can use such a coil to stimulate the brain in a different configuration. So we have also developed focal coils for stimulating small animals. So we collaborate with the neurologist here, and we have tested some of our coil designs on the animals. So here you can see how we make use of multiple coils and ferromagnetic cores to make the field focal. And here, this is a multimagnetic material. This is diamagnetic shield on top of the head, and that is now that in combination with ferromagnetic core in the form of hyperbola shape, we focus the field to a very small region on the mouse or rat's brain. And by doing this, we can test several parameters of the stimulation strength, stimulation duration, and the distance from which we stimulate. So this is a computational study. So this is how for looking at the E field, but we have fabricated the coil as well and tested one type of coil on the rat brain phantom, on actual rats. So, and again, here we show how the fields look like on the surface of the brain when you stimulate with different type of coils. And PFC with the diamagnetic, that is the centermost, very high, the most focal coil, and that's our latest coil. So now I showed you all these different coils which use this time-varying magnetic pulses to stimulate specific area in the brain. In order to study where the stimulation goes and which neurons are getting above the threshold field, we have to do computational study to begin with. And to do computational study, we need to have a head model that accurately replicates the head of either the animal or a human subject. Earlier, they used to use a standard anthropomorphic head model with homogeneous properties, and we started to use, this was way back in 2014-15, when we started to use anatomically accurate or personalized anatomy. So we used MRIs of a person, and then using different processing of the images, we segmented different regions of the brain and then assigned electric and magnetic properties to it in order to calculate where the stimulation occurs, whether certain neurons get above the threshold stimulation or not. And you can see here on the right-hand side how the E field inside the brain varies when you use a standard anthropomorphic head model. So we tested different type of heads, adults, children, MRI, using children MRI, teenager, female, and male adult as well. So we looked at different diseases as well, Parkinsonian brains, the TBI brains, depression brains, healthy brains. So we built a large data set of brain models. We took their MRIs and then developed these brain models. So this is one, you can see how the brain varies between different people. This is a study with 20 subjects. These are, I think these are Parkinsonian subjects. So you can see how their brain varies in terms of size and shape, which means the induced electric field also varies accordingly. So we developed lots of these head models. And when we developed these, one of the medical company that has built this software for calculating SAR and induced electric fields, they licensed our head models. If you are commercially using them, there is a certain fee. But if you are using it for research purposes, they are free. You can download them from their website. But if you want CDs to be mailed to you, then there is certain fee as well. So these are all the head models. So we built so many head models and looked at induced electric field in all different type of diseases, different type of heads. Now we had so many head models, but we wanted to now experimentally measure where the induced currents are in different region of the brain. And to do that, of course, we can't do in live human. So we had to use a phantom in order to measure these induced fields. So there was no phantom that existed in the market. We using these head models and advanced additive manufacturing techniques, we 3D printed these head models that we had built. But then 3D printing uses plastic material, which is not conductive, whose magnetic and electrical properties do not match that of the different regions of the brain. So we had to make our own material whose conductivity we can tune. So we used PDMS and carbon nanotubes of varying concentration in order to get different composites with different electrical conductivity. And the magnetic permeability is just one. So we developed these different compositions, and we use that polymer composite to fill in our shells, and then we dissolve the shells that are plastic, and we are left with PDMS and CNT composite that mimics the brain anatomy and also has electrical conductivity and magnetic permeability similar to that of the brain. And we can do different conductivity for different regions of the brain. So here we look at the anatomical match between the CT scan of a phantom and MRI of the actual person. We overlay on top of each other and we see how well they match. And they match pretty well with some small variations. And here is a schematic flow chart of how we go from MRIs of patients to producing a fully anatomically accurate brain phantom. Also we use skull and skin layers along with CSF to build a full brain model for testing neuromodulation procedures. Here is without the skull and the skin and scalp. We specifically did not put in there because we wanted to test induced electric fields at multiple locations, and these measurements conform with our computer simulations. So now we wanted to test this in a situation where if a person has to get TMS and if the person already has a DBS. So as I said, DBS is a invasive technique which wherein you have two electrodes that are surgically implanted and they rest at a region called subthalamic nucleus, and they continuously stimulate that area to reduce tremor in Parkinson's patients. And it's immediate effect. As soon as they turn on, the tremor goes off. And it's reliable. VCU does 2 such DBS surgeries every week. So it used to be very expensive. I think now the insurance covers it. The costs have come down of DBS. But after about 5-10 years, some of the DBS patients develop speech impairment because of the progression of Parkinson's or both combination of progression as well as the effect of DBS stimulation. So if they have speech impairment, then how do you treat the speech impairment? Because speech impairment occurs from a brain region that is on the surface of the brain. So we decided to use TMS for this purpose for speech impairment, but they already have DBS in there. So there will be electromagnetic interference. So we wanted to use our brain phantom to see what is the electromagnetic interference between the DBS and TMS. Here is a short video describing deep brain stimulation procedure.
Today is the 13th of November, 2010. 1 year ago, on this date, I was in the operating room at Stanford Medical Center for Deep Brain Stimulation Surgery, or DBS. An implanted pulse generator, or IPG, was surgically placed just below my right collarbone and is hardwired under the skin up to the 2 entry points at the top of my head. When it's on, the tremor is optimized. There's virtually no tremor in my right hand. By turning it off with a remote control, you'll see what my condition would be without the DBS. The first 2 attempts to push the correct button failed, but the 3rd attempt worked. The stimulator is now off. Within seconds, you'll see the tremor return. My tremor is a resting tremor, which means when I initiate action with my right hand, the tremor dissipates. When the action stops, the tremor returns. Another visible symptom of Parkinson's is the inability to walk normally. With the stimulator turned off, my body is stiff and I shuffle when I walk. Turning around is difficult and my balance is poor. I don't dare try to hold a cup of hot coffee right now. I don't think you can see it, but close up you'll notice that my face has dropped significantly. I can really feel that at this point. I want to turn the IPG back on now, but I need to put it in my left hand. My right hand would be banging against my chest too much. Within seconds of switching it on, the tremor subsides and virtually disappears. I don't turn the stimulator off very often, but it is definitely an attitude check when I'm feeling frustrated or depressed. Thank God I live in a time for this kind of technology.
So, so you saw how DBS works. Now, if the person has DBS leads in their brain, and if you apply TMS to treat speech impairment, there will be electromagnetic interference. And there are mixed publications in the literature. So when we did the literature survey, we found these varying reports. Some stating it's safe, some stating it's unsafe, and some stating, well, not sure. And a lot of them use either a computer model or a brain phantom, that is a gelatin homogeneous, just standard anthropomorphic head model, just like I showed in the previous slide. So we decided to use our anatomically accurate brain phantom that matching the different electrical conductivity to test this case. So we also did, before that, we did computational study as well, just like others. And what we found during computational study is, okay, by the way, this is how the leads look like. So there is these are the platinum iridium contacts, and each of them is connected by one wire. So you can see that there are 4 leads. So 4 wires will connect them and go on the top of the head and then come out. And then there is a power bank, or it's called IPG, that is implanted on the chest here, that continuously sends small currents to these leads. So, and if we now put TMS coil on the mouth motor area, which is around here, so there will be some interference. So we did the computational study and we looked at various positions. What happens if we move the coil, not just on mouth motor area, but area around it. And here is our results. So if you put it on right on mouth motor area, so the induced electric field from the TMS coil will be highest on the mouth motor area, which is what is represented by blue dots here. And if you look at the induced electric field or the currents in the lead of the DBS, you see a small induced electric field, which is below 50 volts per meter, which is not significant to do any damage or even to alter the function in that area, because it's much below a threshold. So that's when you stimulate on mouth motor area. So we also looked at temperature variation, and there is not significant variation in the temperature. And then we used our phantom to test that case. You can see it. This is the phantom with skin, skull, and CSF inside. This is the DBS lead that comes out. Here we are using one loop, but in actual case, there could be multiple loops. And this lead goes back here in the back of the neck and on the chest with an IPG that continuously sends a current. So now we put our TMS coil around here somewhere. And also we tested what happens if we put our coil right on top of here. That is the worst case scenario we can do. So what happens in the worst case scenario? So as you increase the intensity of the current in the TMS coil, of course, the current in the lead starts to increase. And at the highest intensity of the TMS coil, the current that is measured in the DBS lead is about 3.4 milliamps, which is similar to what is used for treating DBS. So the DBS leads are sent about 3 to 5 milliamps current in order to reduce the tremor. So that means in the worst case scenario, what we do is we end up stimulating a similar amount of current that is already being used. So which is not dangerous, but it alters the function of that region. So that's what we found out with this study. And we also went to develop animal brain phantoms, which is quite tricky. Animal brain phantoms are very small. So it was not easy. And making a head model, anatomically accurate head model of animal, did not exist. We came up with the entire procedure, taking the MRIs of the animal, segmenting different regions and making a head model, excuse me, and then making a brain phantom. So we have patented both these procedures for animal phantom as well as human phantom. And there was so much interest that we decided to launch a company called RAM Phantoms. So thanks to the funding from CCI, so the main funding for developing human brain phantom was provided by CCI, and also to explore commercial viability was also funded by CCI through a D2 Dream to Reality grant. The first one was just for a regular grant, regular research grant, and the second one was a commercialization grant. So this is where we are. My PhD student, Wesley Lohr, he's the entrepreneurial lead, and I'm the technical lead, and we have a industrial mentor as well. We got an SF I-Corps grant that we have completed now. So in next few years, we will start to field test these phantoms, and we are also now making phantoms for traumatic brain injury as well. So again, I think I'll reserve that 5 minutes for questions. This is about motor pathway network, the network in the brain. We have done a lot of studies there too, but I think I will skip this because though it is relevant, but that was not part of CCI project. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me about neuronal networks, how we use them to design coils and design treatment procedures. So to conclude, more focal and more customizable TMS coils or magnetic stimulation coils are needed, and personalized brain phantoms are needed to study the effect of stimulation in different regions for different anatomy with different protocol. And our brain phantoms, both human and animal, can be used to test the safety. Suppose we can, by knowing what is unsafe field, we can limit unsafe fields in all these devices, and we can also come up with features that do not go above certain threshold in certain area, especially if you don't want any stimulation on your brain stem. So we can do all those studies and come up with new tools and procedures using our brain phantom. So this is a work in progress. And with that, I would like to thank CCI, which is represented by State of Virginia. And I also have funding, my collaborators have funding from Veteran Affairs and other funding agencies who have funded me. And I'd like to thank my students and postdocs who have worked on this project. So with that, I'll take any questions you have. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, someone in the chat said, how about sensors instead of stimulators?
Thank you for that question, Paul. Yeah, so there is a tool, or ECOG is basically the electrodes that are implanted right on top of the brain, and that is used for recording brain signals to know when epilepsy occurs. So for epileptic seizures, to treat epileptic seizures, they record these brain signals, and just before the onset of the epileptic seizure, you get this spike in neuronal activity, and that's what they use for recording. And those are implanted below the skull on the top of the brain to get accurate reading. And yes, those are used, and those are now FDA-approved treatments for epileptic seizures. And as just before the onset of the seizure, as soon as they recognize it, they send a small current to suppress that activity. So that is an FDA-approved treatment now, and that is another stimulation recording device. And those devices, of course, if you're not careful, they can be hacked, or you can send a spurious electromagnetic signal or a ultrasound to disrupt or even cause damage to the brain.
Thank you, Dr. Hadimani, for your presentation. It was really informative. We all really enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for coming.